Monday afternoon, bit of coding. Let's see if I can get my head in the game and get some work done. We'll see how it goes today. Might have to be a little shorter today. I'm pretty busy with some other stuff, but I'll just go with the flow and see how things turn out. I never quite know. So let's get on over here. So I have my code open here to a random background generator, and I still have the REPL open in random background generator here. So I'm just gonna try and wrap that up quickly, and then what I'm gonna do, wrap up final working example of RBG. So all that means is use my CSS and my HTML to remove depths on Hiccup and Garden. For the sake of this stream, refactoring and making my implementations not horrible should be a YouTube video or something. Blog post, probably, something like that. But I wanna get the random background generator to a state that works the way I intend, and then I can actually make it like a proper program. So that's not going to take too long, I hope, because I have the idea for how I want to make it how I want to finish it up. And then after that, theorize and test out some ideas for better data structure for 3D objects in my stylo library, right? So all that means is here, the data structure that makes up these 3D objects here, which are rendered in SVG, so they're just 2D shapes that happen to look 3D through the draw function that I have. Anyway, the data structure for them to me feels kind of clunky. Like I'm kind of working against the way Clojure is intended to be used. So I have to kind of figure out how I want to approach that. So I might just spend some time messing around in the REPL with that after. So to finish things up though, I'm gonna go here and just find where I should be in my code here, and then I'll go from there. So I have here make SVG, which will, as it says, make an SVG, and it is not working right now because of the way my CSS and my HTML implementations don't recurse properly. So instead of building the proper recursion thing right now, all I'm going to do is just make the data structure that I pass into it work up front without recursion. So that's messy and incorrect in terms of a complete implementation, but I'm going to do that offline, and then I want to kind of capture my thoughts in notes to make a blog post and like maybe make a short YouTube video, almost mostly for my own benefit, because recursion is a thing that, like, in principle it's not hard and I understand it completely, but I don't use it quite often enough to just rattle it out, like to just perfectly use it every time. So that's a thing that I need to practice, and making my own set of notes and videos and stuff is basically something that future me will find useful as well. At least that's my theory. But enough about that. I want to get this thing off my plate, out of my brain, so I can think about 3D data modeling again, because that's fun and challenging and probably important for the library I'm working on and the design and engineering stuff that I want to keep working on. Anyway, if there's anyone tuned in right now, thanks for that. I appreciate that a lot. Feel free to join in on the chat. As you can most certainly tell, I'm new to this small or little following, which is totally cool. Like, it's just got to grow over time. Right? To be streaming programming, I really do enjoy it. I'm not a perfect programmer, and I feel like that's kind of the value of streaming some of this stuff is, you know, I'm a real human who runs into real problems, right? And programming and building things is not, and designing, it's not about getting things right every time. It's about working through problems, working around things, figuring out better ways to do it. And so I really love doing that. So anyone watching now or watching in the future, please feel free to leave comments, anything like that, as suggestions for how I can grow this, improve it, that kind of stuff. Because I love this enough to keep doing it. So if I can make it better for more and more people, that is awesome. Okay, so enough chit chat. I'm going to finish this up. And I'm going to do that by reminding myself how this breaks. Make SVG. Give it a name. The width, we'll just make it small so that it's not a huge file. Okay. Don't know how to create iSeq from Clojure Lang keyword in snip to HTML. Right, so, pardon me, here, if I gen background, I can see the data structure that I'm passing into my HTML. Okay, so here we have a doubly nested list in here, right? And a G tag and an SVG tag. So where does that break? I'm guessing it breaks here. So what I want to do is change the function generate background to not nest things like that. Okay. Oh. Well, what have I done here? Anyway, I was testing something yesterday and I changed, I commented out most of the generate background function, which is not helpful in this instance. Okay, so we have here more nested lists than I'd care to use. Let me see here if I can do something like this. Instead of popping those in a list, I actually just, let's see. Make it directly. Run that. What does that produce? It gives me, inside the G tag here, this style string, which is fine. And then this style tag this G contains a list of style things, and the style tag ends here, which is theoretically fine. But then there's a new list here. So actually, does that work? If I run my HTML over this, will it produce HTML that works? No. No, it will not. And the reason is I don't want to think about it too much right now. I'm going to try something here. Concat those two lists together. Yeah. Let's try that. Okay, so we do have a single list. Ooh. Something's not right. This style tag is now incorrectly formatted. Boy, oh boy. All I want is to get this working. So all I need to do is pay attention to what I'm trying to do. Yeah, okay, so SVG style here. Why is this inside that tag? Is that what I want? Not really. Right, I don't actually want that. Okay. Right. We have the SVG tag containing everything. Nested inside there is a group tag. We don't need the group. We don't need the style thing inside the group thing. Actually, what we want is kind of that to be in its own spot. So let's get rid of it for a moment. So here, I've got a SVG. Inside that is a group tag. Inside the group tag is a doubly nested list of rectangles and lines. So if I run my HTML on that, I don't think it'll work. Right. So if we look at the SVG function here, and content is always in a list, which, so if I make it nothing, right, it won't, now this won't do anything, or it shouldn't do anything. Right? And now my HTML should work on that, but it's not, so I messed something up. Oops. 100, 120. Okay. So we've got some things working and some things not. Story of my life. If we begin here, wait a second. Here. Okay. My implementation, HTML. I've got just a mess of a snip to HTML function here, right? These conditions are messy and it doesn't totally work. But if I run my HTML on and snippets, right, it does something incorrect. And that's because well, I'm not sure. I'll think about that in a minute. Okay, can't create a sequence from keyword. That means it's breaking things down. So that does mean it's going here instead. Right, like this should say yeah. So oh yeah, I should also fix that. The generator is making stuff that contains content, and here, gen background, I do want the style tag because that should be fine. I also have to rebuild this. Right, so we have gen background should now generate the data that I anticipate. If I run this on gen background, okay, so it's basically working. No, is it? Print line that. Right, so the SVG tag and the G tag here are fine. And then the style opening tag is fine. Then we have the C data tag, which is good. And we've got the CSS is all good here. And the G closing tag and the SVG closing tag. But it's totally missing the this part here, right? And that would be because it only triggered one it ended up in this branch, I think. Which I don't want it to be there. So let me try. if I go to gen background again, no. Boy. I want to figure out a more clear workflow as well. I like the idea of Emacs and org mode to do literate programming where you can type your logical, your prose documentation directly in line with your code. But I need to really sit down and kind of map out a workflow that's going to be nicer to use, because this poking around in these things is it can be confusing. So I really want to figure that out. But here, this is where I wanted to go. Right, so if I look at what this line of code does by itself, actually, another thing I should do is learn how to be faster with keyboard shortcuts and stuff. Gen background data is a list of those things. So if you, I always forget how conj works. It starts with the collection. So let's say the collection is a list of numbers 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and I want to conj 4 onto that list. Does it end up at the front? Yeah, so I can actually do this, I think. Conj this thing first, because it's a list of items, and then just conj the SVG style onto that. It should pop into the front, and that should be the shape of things that I want. So let's find out. Generate background. Looks right, mostly. Yeah, it does look right, but there's a doubly nested list now, so I wonder if that'll properly transform. Oop, don't need caps lock on there. Snip to HTML of this junk. Hey, there we go. So let me print line that, see if it'll print a little nicer so I can read it. Does it look correct? No, it doesn't. See, I have here SVG's fine, G tag's fine. Right here, this is not fine, right? We've got this weird looking opening tag, and then the closing tag is like this weird injection of the data as well. So that's not correct. That's not right. Well, let me try this one now. Oh, that's right. That's wrong. Okay, so I think the reason this is all wrong is because of my conditional stuff being all wacky, right? So I'm going to try one thing here. If I do this, oops. Now we're closer, but it's still not totally right. So now we have a correct tag there, but does gen background 50, 50, 25 do what I want it to? Right, so the G tag here still has, right, it's still only doing the first item in this whole list here. Which is not what I need it to do. I need it to work properly. Let's have a look. Let's see if this is where it's ending up. Snip to HTML. Yeah. Okay. So why is the count of content equal to 1? I thought it would be count of content is equal to 1 in this case. Okay, so what does content look like? Content looks like right. Right, so if you do that, wouldn't this work if you do this? If you just get rid of this branch entirely? I've made a mess of this implementation. Well, I'm frustrating myself about this because, like, really, I just need to sit and think through this properly, but I don't want to do that on stream because it's just going to be me, like, sitting like this a lot. I would rather be working on my 3D modeling data structure, so I'm really just taking shortcuts now, trying to get this to like a state where I can really just focus on it, excuse me, after the stream, because that would make the most sense to do that instead. The entire reason that this is all wrong is because I haven't properly like done recursive work here, right? Like I'm just mapping. This is just not, it's not good yet. This isn't right. But if I do snip to HTML on the little parts of it, I think it works. Generate background data 50, 50, 20. Okay, right, so if I map snip to HTML over this, right, it works. And if I do apply string to this, it works. So what I'm just going to do, I'm also going to check for a moment. There, print line this. Yeah, that's correct. So I'm just going to manually assemble these two things together, right? Because that's pretty straightforward. So here, whoops. Oops. trying to be clever here. Okay, I'm stopping this for now because I need to do some actual thinking, and doing it on stream is not helping me right now. So the rbg.core I'm gonna put aside for now. Finish rbg.core offline. Make a video explaining it later. Maybe stream the finished product, the finished program working on a future stream. Okay, so that's that, because my brain's just not working for me right now. So instead of working against it, I'm just gonna go with the flow and work with it. So on that note, what I'm gonna do is kill this REPL. I don't need it anymore. Close this, and now I'm gonna get back to another library I was working on, stylo, which helps me make these sort of 3D modeling document things. And what I want to do is sort of theorize about how I could represent this data structure in a nice way that makes sense. So let me load up those files. Geez, stylo.org. There's that. Oh, there's that. Okay, so it's always nice to just have a little note spot here. I've got work log and stream notes there. And this now is the stylo library, and I can jack in and get a REPL going there. And I can attach a watcher to it, to the file I'm working on, hopefully. I find for whatever reason, I don't know why, and maybe it's just because I never bothered to look and figure it out, but if I kill a REPL, sometimes if I'm starting a new REPL, it doesn't want to work for me in Emacs. So then instead of like figuring out why that is, I always just close Emacs, open it again, and then get back to the spot I was at, and it seems to work. And I think that's happening right now. Like it's hanging on something, because normally I get the REPL at this point. So what I'm gonna do is just start Emacs over again, and it then should work fine. I feel like I have more things, like since I started streaming, there's way more things that I'm immediately realizing need a lot of work in my workflow and my approach to things. I just really need to refine my thinking. And that's hard to do, you know? It's good, but it's a tough thing to do. Okay, so let's first open my work log. Get back to today. Oh, I forgot to save. Well, whatever. It didn't save the notes. I thought I saved it, but I did not. But whatever, life goes on. Find file, dev stylo, stylo.org here. There we go. Cider jack in. Now Cider should open fairly quickly. We're good. I want to move it to this window. There we go. Okay. Right, so let me load up the builder file and go into that namespace. That should work now. I wonder if I could make a function here. Defin watch. I wonder if watch is already. Nope. Let's see if I can wrap this into a function that I could use to spawn like different watchers on different files, because I wonder if I could make that work the way I want. I forget how I structured this. I'm also not sure that it actually makes a lot of sense. It's kind of weird, right? Like I've got, well, first of all, let me move those out of the way. So I've got build and then build exclamation, which actually spits the file to disk given the name. Build here as a file name to watch. Right, so build gets past a watch object, or whatever you want to call it. And when name equals file name, then you do those things. You print building whatever, and then you actually run the build. Which is right, you build the name, right, you build the file of the same name that you're watching. Okay, so watch MD is what I'm going to do here, name, right? Then that's going to call watchdir with partial build string name dot md but it also needs to def. Right? One nice thing about this, def W, hey Mad Skills, hi, how are you? Not sure if I am pronouncing your name right, but how's it going? So what the first thing that comes to mind here is to def name as this whole thing, but what's bad about that is to put a def inside a function here is basically bad practice for Clojure. So I have to think about this for a minute. I can pronounce it as I like. You're doing good. Glad to hear that. I'm doing okay. It's a Monday afternoon, and for whatever reason, my brain's not like fully into the zone of writing code. So I'm a little slower on the uptake, and it's even my own code. So you'd think it'd go nice and quick, but some days it just doesn't. But that's okay. Sometimes slow and steady is a little nicer to work through code anyway. Hope things are generally going okay. You working on any cool code projects? Any other projects? I am just doing my best. So I'm actually going to try this. This is horrible practice, but I'm going to see what happens. I've got to finish this here. Clojure.java.io/file. And I'm just going to use the current working directory as the spot to do it, right? So if I do that, no symbol build in this context. Oh, okay. Oh, geez. What have I done? There's the REPL. I don't know much programming other than Lua. Thought of learning Python, but you can't make yourself learn it. Oh yeah, I totally know what you mean. So I'll be honest, I'm actually self-taught. What you see on the screen here, I'm writing in a language called Clojure. It's a Lisp language. So Python, you might, like the order in which you'd write this here, 2 times 2, for example. In a Lisp, you write the function first and then the arguments to it. But in something like Python, you would write 2 times 2, and then it would give you an answer. Point being, I totally get it. It's hard to know even where to start, right? Like with any programming language, it's this big, massive thing. And it can be useful, but like how on earth do you even start to learn those sorts of things? I don't have a straightforward answer at the moment, but I've been thinking about that kind of stuff a lot, and I wonder if one day I can, help with that problem generally speaking. But all that to say, I totally get it. Don't even know what to make when starting. Yeah, that's actually a tough thing. I studied mechanical engineering in university, and for some of our classes we had to learn a bit of C, and in other classes we had to learn a bit of MATLAB. So doing math with arrays and matrices and all kinds of stuff like that. So I had to learn for school, which was fine, but I never really started to teach myself stuff until in one of my jobs I was trying to recreate a calculation for like a beam cross section. I could do it in Excel, but I just decided to try do it in Python. And at that time it was like a glorified calculator for me, but it was cool enough that I just started learning from there. A lot of people seem to start by learning how to do games, which I think can be good, but even that is risky, right? Because a game, you kind of need to know, like you kind of need to do this much work before you can even see something useful, and that can be really discouraging. There's no easy way sometimes. It's like you need a goal, yeah. So I'll explain very briefly kind of the intent of why I'm streaming, because I'm not the best programmer in the world, so people wouldn't necessarily want to tune in just for my mad programming skills, because there are people who are way better at that than I am. But what I'm doing, I'm writing this little library that it parses, so it takes a text file and it renders it out nicely, and it will do more advanced stuff too. Like I have a little 3D rendering thing here that will put diagrams in there, and the point is I use this little library to make documents for some designs that I want to do. So my little goal is to make this code library useful for other stuff that I want to do over time, and I'm streaming kind of that iterative process. I make a function that spits out something that I want and figure out if it's fast enough, it's too slow, it doesn't make any sense, it doesn't work, and just slowly kind of working through things over and over and over again. So I'm not even sure I made sense, but my goal for what I'm working on is to code up this kind of document rendering library that I can use for other projects that are really interesting to me. Because computers are just tools, right? They're very general and powerful tools, and you can do a lot with them, but they're just tools. So making it easier for yourself, yeah, I'm attempting to. So yeah, like computers are just tools, right? So whatever, if you find there's something you want to do in the realm of a hobby or something at work even, it almost doesn't matter if you can't program the right way or anything, right? Like a goal is, I want to do this thing a little bit easier. I want to not have to think about manually doing this or manually doing that. And who knows, maybe there's a small little goal there. And then once you start to do that, you can realize there's more and more and more stuff that you can actually just kind of make the computer do for you. Oh man, I think I might be rambling a little more than is helpful at this point, so apologies for that. But the other side of it all is not everybody has to be a programmer, right? Like if it's something that's interesting to you, then I think anyone should be able to explore. Hey, thanks for the follow. I appreciate that. Mad skills. It's kind of you. Yeah, but I guess I love programming because because it makes my computers work for me in cool ways, and it's a lot of fun. But it's totally not for everyone either, and that's really not a bad thing. So this is me stepping off my soapbox now, and I'm going to try figure out where I was a moment ago. Feel free to keep commenting, asking questions, of course. And anyone else who might be watching, you go right ahead. I'm glad to chat. So what I'm doing here, so I've got this thing, I can run this function here, standing point, and it will start a file watcher that it's watching this file. So if I make a change to it, or I even save it, it runs the build function on it. And so here it says building standing point.md. So what I'm trying to do is generalize that function a little bit. But I'm committing a little Clojure sin, as it were, here. Def name inside a function is risky because it puts Like it kind of pollutes your namespace with more symbols than you might have expected otherwise. So, is that good? It's not perfect, but I do want to see if it will produce 2 builders at a time. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to run that. Actually, first I'm going to close watcher W. Right, so now it's not watching any file, which is good. And I'm going to try to watch MD on the file with the name. Oh, I have to, before I do that, I realize there's something I've done wrong. If I go like this, actually, does that work? Yeah. So I can make symbols with period, with points in them, which is good. Oh no, I guess I can't. Oh right, because this is a, oh boy, this is a syntactical thing. Well, right, so let me forget that then. Let's turn a symbol into string of name and dash MD like that. Right, that should work, I think. Argument to def must be a symbol. Yeah. You know what? Forget this. I'll do this later. I'll put a little note here. Create a watchMD function that spawns a watcher with given name so that you can easily watch several files at one time. But for right now, I'll just do it the good old-fashioned lazy way. Make the watcher W here, so that is working now. If I save this, I should see in a moment the little symbol or the little note building. There we go. And now what I'm going to do is go back here. I'm in a Python REPL. Oh, it's been a while since I've used Python, so I don't need to be in that REPL right now. And I was going to go into a different folder, cd stylo, and here I'm going to spawn a live server, which will just serve up a localhost page, and I can use that to check the rendered version. And now, anytime I make a file change, it will automatically update itself. So let's just double check that that's working. We'll do a sanity check. So here I am trying to remember what I've done. Okay, so leg sketch. I'm extruding the leg sketch by 5. Let's change that to GT, the global thickness that I had defined at an earlier time. Save that. One thing that sucks, yeah, see that? Cool. So it updated right here. So let's do one other sanity check. So we should see the word sanity check show up right here in just a moment. Yep, perfect. Okay, so that is nice. Now, what I'm about to start doing, did that even make grammatical sense? I don't think so. What I'm about to do is start working on improving or crafting the ideas behind a better way to store my 3D object data. So what I'm going to do there actually is replicate this triangle in my REPL with this line. Right, so try sketch. So if I look at that, that's the shape of this 2D object. It's got a list of nodes and it's got a list of edges and it's got a list of faces. It has only one face. So I'm also then gonna def extruded triangle as extrude of try sketch. Oh, I need to extrude it, excuse me, by need to give it a height. I want to extrude it by 10. And as it turns out, first I thought the model was just a picture, but it was actually something you made yourself. Yeah, so this, it maybe seems a little convoluted, but this here on the left window, what I'm highlighting here, is it's a document. It's kind of like a markdown document, and it creates, so my program is running here, right? This is called a REPL. It's running my code. This REPL is running, like, it's Clojure is the name of the program, but what it's doing is it's looking for changes to this file, and then it's updating the web page here with the changes. So anything I change in here will be updated in here. It's a little slow. Like, what I would want is like literally instantaneous. If I change something here, it automatically changes here, but there's a bit of a delay. So it's not one-to-one. It looked a lot like a picture. Well, so I guess technically speaking, like this here, if I inspect this element, I'm not sure how much you know about HTML and SVG, but it is technically actually just a static image. Here, it's just that I can update it and it re-renders it. So at the moment, like if this were a true 3D object, like I could click and drag it and it would turn around, but I don't have that implemented yet. But in the future, that's the idea, because that'd be really cool. So for right now, it's a one-way change. If I change the document, the rendered view updates. Hey, and Permyakov, sorry if I mispronounced your name. Apologies there. Mad Skills sounds cool. Yeah. How did I end up writing in Clojure? That's actually a good question. So I'm self-taught in all of my programming. So I'll just say that up front. I'm not the best, right? Like, there are definitely better programmers, but I'm trying to improve more and more, and that's one reason why I enjoy streaming. But I started with Clojure because I had originally started with Python, but as I was trying to do more stuff with it, I kept finding that the object-oriented stuff that people kept talking about was really confusing me. Like you have to make classes and you have to build up this whole code architecture that is a class that has another class and all this kind of stuff. Now, I don't know. I don't want to comment too much on the validity of object-oriented programming, but for me at the time, I just was a little frustrated with it. So at the same time, I wanted to start changing how I thought about programming in general. And so I started looking around. I had heard about Lisps in general. They seemed cool for like a different way to think about programming. And just figured I would dive in on the Lisp that seemed the most modern, which was Clojure. And just kind of banged my head against the desk learning Emacs enough to get a Clojure setup going. And since then, I've been really loving it. Like, if you look at some of the other VODs that I have up, when I'm kind of in a zone, it's really, really awesome to be able to do like, I can't come up with a trivial example right now. Map, multiply, all of these things onto all of those things. It's just like extremely straightforward. And once you kind of get into that logic, it's cool to use. And once you get comfortable trying like you try the smallest little thing in the REPL and see what it prints out for you, and then you put that into the function, and then you say, okay, now what's the next thing I want to put into the function? And you can just build up and up and up and up, really small things at a time. And that flow, once I figured it out, really clicked, and I've really enjoyed that in Clojure, honestly, more than Python. When I was originally using Python, right, I had you go like this, right, Python, and then there's this is the Python REPL, and like Python's fantastic. I still like it a lot, but I didn't understand the value of using a REPL with Python. For whatever reason, the REPL in Clojure just stuck in my brain a little easier. You know, I don't know. I just like it a lot. It's as simple as that at the end of the day. Your path to Clojure was similar, except you grok OOP. Yeah, that's totally cool. So, like I said, I don't know your background. Maybe you had some formal training in programming. Maybe not. I never did, and like anytime I started trying to figure out object-oriented programming, I would my eyes would glaze over, and that really speaks more about me than it does about object-oriented programming. So, you know, but that's a really long-winded answer. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. Lisp is cool, so let's learn the modern one. It's also running on a great platform, just such as JSM. I think probably you meant JVM. I think the JVM. Yeah, JVM. Yeah, actually, that's another really good point. I love that Clojure works on the JVM and Clojure script on like transpiles to JavaScript, and there's like other great implementations that people are working on that work on, I think it's CNET or C# or .NET, the .NET framework. I've not used that one. It's just, the reach is pretty cool as well. So I'm a fan. Let's see here if I can put my mind back to where I wanted to be. I was talking about, oh yes, that's right. Well, I can just get rid of this because I don't need it right now. Let's leave that. There. Perfect. Okay, so what I was gonna do was start figuring out how I can make a data structure that makes sense. So, big asterisk, not an expert, just making something that came off the top of my head. This is what I came up with for kind of a dumb 3D modeling structure. So in that, I've got three things, right? I can pull the keys from it, I think, like this. Yeah, right? So I have just three keys: nodes, edges, faces. And if I pull faces from there, xtri means extruded triangle. The value of faces is a list of these maps here. And those maps, if I take the first from that, right, it's got a value and it's got attributes. And I just threw this together, right? Like this color is just some, like it's a CSS name color. And the fill I made different for some reason. It's just the way it is. And then the value can technically be anything. I made a little helper function called entity that will just put anything into that val space, basically. Or if I optionally give it an attribute map, it'll merge the maps. So I could add arbitrary attributes here. Attribute ASDF contains a string that's blah. Now the attributes section here has ASDF blah merged into it. So that seems fine, and it might be, but what I don't like is how if I pull a faces, let me go back here, pull first of faces of this triangle, this extruded triangle. What am I doing? Did it work? Try. If I type things right, it might work better. So if I actually look at the value from here, this is just a vector with indices in it. And these indices are implicitly, like you'd have to know this just up front, that I made it 0, 1, and 2 are indices into the list of edges, right? So basically you read it as this face is defined by the edges 0, 1, and 2. And those edges, 0, 1, and 2, you have to find by looking at the 0 edge, the 1 edge, and the 2 edge. And then if you look at the edges, the value for the first edge is 0 and 1, which link to the 0 node and the 1 node. So there's a lot of there's just everything, it cascades downward, but you have to know up front that those are all linked to each other through indices, right? And I kind of abuse get, right? You can use get on vectors because a vector is basically, it's kind of like a map where the key is the index and the value is whatever, right? It looks like that. So if I do get from that 0, it's but that looks the same as if I get from this vector, right? So I don't know, I don't know if this is really like the most effective way to do things with 3D data. So the other thought I had was something that looks kind of like this. If I imagine just a face, right? It might be tagged like this, and then the face itself is going to have an edge, right? It's going to have 4 end of file, what? Def example. face. A face is going to be made up of any number of edges. So in this triangle case, I'm going to make it 3. Right? And each edge is going to, right, so that's a face, is 3 edges, but each edge is going to be, in the simple case, made up of 2 nodes. So node, and this is going to be a node, or you could call it a vertex, I guess, if you want to use that term. They're kind of the same in this case. And then a node, you could further break a node down into like X, Y, Z. But I don't know, that seems a little overkill. So for the nodes, what I might do instead is just have a 1, 1, 1, and a 2, 3, 4, right? Where at the very least, so I don't want things to be overly implicit, but nodes and vertices are pretty much always going to be X, Y, Z vectors. In which case you could even technically just not tag it like that. You could just have it be a vector of 3 numbers like that. Right? And then, well, if I wanted to make this like a face that actually made sense, let's do the 2D case. 0, 0. Putting a tag in the vector itself looks a little strange. Do you mean in the node, like directly right here, like tag here? Or do you even mean like inside just like that? Yeah, it seems overkill. It does match the logic that you follow through the rest of this, but yeah, I mean, there's a point where too many tags is also a problem, right? Yeah, the former. Yeah, thanks. So here, let me just make a valid triangle. Go an old pen and paper for a second here. 0, 0. We'll make it 0, 10. 10, 5, because that's cool. And then 0, 0. So what I would do in this case, right, you got your first edge is going to be 0, 0 to 0, 10. Your second edge is going to be 0, 10 to make it 10, 0 instead, so that we're not going up Y. We go like that, right? 10 along X. And then this one, if we want it to be halfway, right? So we could do 5X, no, 10, 0. And this one would be 5, 10. And the final edge would have 2 like that, face def, where the final one would be 0, 0, and this would be 5, 10. Right, so that's an example. And what this is this is a tree structure, right? By the way, you don't have to call get to access a vector element by its index. A vector itself is a function. Oh, really? Function accepting an index. So like this, let's see here. 1, 2, 3. Whoa, that's cool. I didn't know that. I'm gonna just, this works. Thanks for the tip. That's pretty cool. If you call 0 on that yields a. There we go. Save that. That's useful. Maps work that way too. Yeah, so I actually did know that about maps. So what I'll do often with maps, I don't know why, I think it's just because I figured this out first and then it stuck in my brain. If I have a map, I usually do, like, I pretend that the key is a function, right? Like you run A over the map to get its value, like this. But you're suggesting, I did know that it also works, oops, like this. It's the same thing. So I think because I'm used to this way, putting the key first, that's why I used get, because I tried this and that obviously didn't work, right? You can't do it that way. So that's kind of the difference, I guess, or at least why I had a blind spot there. But thanks for the reminder. That's pretty useful. Using a keyword as a function. Yeah. So that is, the keyword as a function is how that works in my brain, and that's why why I used get, because it, anyway, don't need to over explain that. Thanks for the tip. That's actually quite helpful. I do wonder if, since you can, like, you can access, like, you can do it both ways, like this, if it's a little risky in terms of readability to, like, mix up the way that you do it, right? Like, if you do key as function or map as function, right? And then you mix it up, like if I do this by default and then I suddenly am doing things like this, I don't know if that, like, if future me would just be really confused by that. Maybe I'm worrying about it too much, I don't know. So I was working on this idea here. Only keywords work that way, not other key types. Yeah, actually that's another good point. You know, I kind of, maybe the lesson for me is I have to stop doing things this way, because that, like, it only works in specific instances, and you're more able to get like you're more consistent if you do it this way, right, where the key is here, right? Because you're totally right that this wouldn't work. Whoops, key. Right, of course it's an error. Oh, these are all problems for when I'm not streaming, when I can just kind of stare at the screen and think for a little while about what I want to do. Not sure which way is idiomatic. Yeah, I don't either. One thing, like Clojure, I love it. It's so great. I do find, since there are so many subtly different ways to attack things, or attack to solve little problems, that occasionally I'm wondering, is this the way, like, a really professional Clojure person would do it? And I get self-conscious about my solution. I feel like that problem will just go away as my confidence increases with it over time. But yeah, that does happen sometimes. Anyway, that's all okay. I'm here to build something that works and build my skills in programming as I go. So I'm not going to worry too much about it. Thanks for pointing out those little tips. It actually really is helpful, because there's always more to learn, right? Different ways to think about things. So what I'm thinking about right now is the conciseness of a structure like this, right? Like, if I look at the way I have implemented this so far, there's some differences here. And as your confidence increases and you get entrenched in the wrong way of doing things, Yeah, actually, that's a great point. There's risk either way you go, right? You either get really confident in the wrong way, or you stay super unconfident and never like learn to push past that. I guess, as in most things, there's a balance to be struck. I have to go to the washroom, so I'm actually gonna be right back. I won't be long. Feel free to stick around. It'll be like 5 minutes. I won't be long at all. All right, sorry about that. It's been the weather around here has been really nice for the past month or so. It's been getting really warm, and I go on runs a lot, but when it gets warmer, you have to drink more water because you sweat more of it away. Unfortunately, the body can only hold so much water after a run, so apologies for that. Anyway, so let's clear that. Let's take the example here, and let's take the try sketch data structure here. So one thing that kind of strikes me as maybe not the best is that this structure I've implemented so far uses indices and is like, you just have to know that those are indices into the list one level lower than it. So faces goes to edges, edges goes to nodes. And that seems pretty straightforward, right? Because 3D structures kind of work that way anyway, so people might quickly figure that out, but I don't know if it's that concise. But one thing that I do like about it is that there's this ability to attach attributes to any point or any entity automatically, right? So an edge here, in this case they're all the same, but you could theoretically put edge number 2 has a different color entirely. And the fill, why is there a fill on that? It doesn't make sense, but whatever. And face 1 versus face 2 could have different fills, right? So you could attach different rendering colors and whatnot. And in the future you could attach material properties to objects with those attribute maps, right? So that seems valuable. One other thing about the example that I don't love is there's repetition of vertex data here, right? So I've got 10 0 10 0 5 10 5 10. It's duplicated, but there's no node duplication here, right? There's just duplication of the indices, and then the node itself the data for the node stays there. You think it's faces are usually described as sequences of vertices. Faces described as sequences of vertices. So a face would almost look like, example 2 would maybe even look something like this. You've got a face, and let's say it's the same triangle face. You actually could just do it like this even more concisely. So you've got 0, 10, 5, 10, 0, 0. I don't know why I did it in that order. 0, 0, 10, 0. Nope. Yeah. 5, 10. Right. So a face would be something even more concise like that. So the thought going through my head there is that you lose the ability to uniquely call out an edge. So in this example, in the first example, I can go through the tree and there's things labeled edges explicitly, right? But it's all, in example 2, it's all implicit, right? Like there's, the only reason you know that there's an edge between these is because that's just like, that's you how you've defined it. But then you could run, you could make a function, give me an edge, right? And then it could take a face, and you could do something like give me edges, yeah, if you think you may need to associate data with edges, your approach is fine. Yeah, I guess that's, you kind of implied a good point there, right? Like define the data for what you know you're going to need to do. And maybe that's another part of my problem here is, do I actually know what features, functionality I need for my 3D elements? So one thing I know I need is, I don't know what I need. So I do know, I'm kind of imagining this as something you could use to make like CAD drawings, maybe not the most sophisticated CAD drawings, but you know, some CAD stuff. So you would need edges and you would need faces to be addressable, because at any given point you might want to show or hide a certain face but still show its edges. You might want to have certain edges have dotted lines because they're occluded by other faces, that sort of thing. So it seems very likely that I will need solids, faces, edges, and nodes all to be able to have, all to be addressable, to apply different colors and such. Very useful notes. Future me is gonna be so happy with that. That's okay. So part of me does wonder though, if I have like kind of a high level definition of a thing, right? And then a bunch of functions that just progressively build out more of the data. So I only ever compute as much as I need, kind of almost sort of on demand, right? So def and give me edges of a face, right? So from face, I would do something like partition to 1 of rest of face. Would that work? Is that what I need? Let me see. Right, so give me edges of example 2. I'm almost the way I wanted. That's almost what I wanted. First of that. Oops. Right, so what I could do is here I do into edge. Oh, wait. I'd have to map into edge. Is this gonna work? Close. Anyway, that is, I'm just messing around. You might want to skim 3D rendering API that you're going to use. Yeah, that's a really good point. So on that note, actually, so what I'm doing right now, so I'm just making sort of like an extension to a little markdown kind of parsing thing, right? So this is just markdown. Oops. I don't want to collapse that. So this is just markdown, and I'm using instaparse for that, and then it just drops it in. I've got some minimal CSS to make a HTML page kind of look nice. And then I have here a really rough implementation of extensions, which right now are these weird looking tags, an open extension tag and a closed extension tag, which on a side note, I want to make look maybe like that or something like that. I haven't figured out, like this was just the first thing that I thought of, and it works. And what it does is it actually just runs eval on the contents of the tag. So here, see it, and then it renders it into the document, which is the first thing I thought of. Is it safe? Absolutely not. Is it the right way to do it if I want to like release this library? No. So that's all stuff I intend to keep working on in the background, right? But for the sake of this stream, it produces visual stuff that looks nice, so it's kind of cool. But so the 3D rendering API, excellent point. I kind of want to keep my data structure abstract enough that I can make it, the data I use, I can make a little thing that plunks it out into this context and that context, so I don't have to redo a ton of work every time. So what you see right here is actually, whoops, geez, I'm losing my mind. These are actually just SVG elements. See that? So it's only like it's projected into a 3D sort of environment, kind of. See that? So there's like these points have like crazy long float things here, so it's not like safe and all that stuff, right? It's just I made it work. I did something that made it look like what I wanted, and it's a matter of refining from there. So basically, right now, I'm using SVG to make a static image, like a projection of the 3D object. I want to use Canvas and the WebGL to do 3D eventually, and build on from there. But to get this document, this little standing desk thing that I want, I'm making something that'll work mostly the way I want and convey the information I need. And then I'm going to start designing another thing, like I want to make some gym equipment, and then I'll enhance the library to do better 3D for that, and just keep going that way. Keeping the data representation abstract while being able to derive from it whatever the API needs. Yeah, that's the like hope I have, because that would be really good for reusability and just over time it makes the investment in a reasonably good data structure pay off better, right? As you can use it in so many different places. So that's why I'm kind of agonizing over this a little bit, because I want to figure out a way that makes sense, and I haven't cracked that nut yet. So that's why I'm theory crafting a little bit here. So in fact, actually, I'm gonna put a little scratch spot here. This is a spot to store ideas about structure, about data structure, program art, etc. It's messy, it's messy, and that's okay. Perfect. Yeah, so I can at least kind of save Clojure, little things that I'm doing here in there. So if I define example, actually, can I do this? Clojure.repl/source. Zip. Will it spit back? Source not found. Oh, right. So if I defined it in the REPL, it like compiles it immediately into an object or something, and so the code's not, it's like ephemeral, but the object is there. That's fine. This example is, I hard-coded it anyway, so it doesn't matter. So I could do this. Am I the fastest? No. Definitely not. I always like think to myself, hey, I should really learn more keyboard shortcuts and set things up more effectively, but sometimes I just don't want to, you know? Sometimes I'm lazy. Thanks, by the way, everyone, for watching, for chatting. I really appreciate that. If you're just watching and not wanting to chat, that's totally cool. I get that, but I really like streaming. I want to keep doing it more and more. So engagement and chatting is just another fun little thing. Kind of keeps the energy up. So thanks for that. Hope everyone's having a good time. Right, so there's example, and example 2 was even more concise, and it was actually just this. Right, so got 0, 0, 10, 0, 5, 5, 10. So scratch 3D data ideas. So we've got concisely store 3D model data. I don't want a structure that is too heavy, but I also don't want something that relies too heavily on implied structure. These are some examples of what might work. Note, lookup / read what other people do. This feels like honestly like a well-solved problem in general, like good 3D storage methods. Like one thing I do know is there's this thing called GLTF format. Maybe there's something to learn there from that. I think it's GLTF. Chronos, yeah, GLTF. Graphic language transmission format, I think, something like that. It's quite amazing. I've run into this before. Now, this kind of model is not really what I'm after, right? Like that's got animation on it. That's like something someone did in Blender or Maya or something. My use case is definitely more into the CAD territory. Oh, that's a YouTube video. I don't need to watch that right now. The JPEG of 3D, I don't know. So one cool thing is, right, it's a JSON, can store textures. So this is a tangent, but maybe this is something I should look into, right? Because I mean, like if you could make stuff that people use in Unity, that's cool. Blender, who knows? I have to figure that out. Okay. On second thought, prepending the actual items in a vector with a keyword makes the vector self-describing. Prepending the items in a vector with a keyword makes it self-describing. You mean like what I've been calling tags, like tag and then values? Is that what you're referring to? MP3 goes straight to Napster in their picture? Oh, it does it? I wasn't paying attention. Sorry, I put myself off track for a moment there. Yeah, tags. So I watched someone's talk. It was at a Clojure Conj or something like that. It's on YouTube. I don't remember where it is, but they called another word to describe this. I heard was this idea was variance. And I forget why, but it's anyway, the tags, variance, the keyword. The idea is not totally new, and in fact, if I think about it, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Hiccup. I think probably everyone who's heard of Clojure has in some way heard of Hiccup as well. Oop. Oh, I should actually run the function, not there. So, right, Hiccup actually uses this kind of structure a little bit. It uses like tags in vectors and produces output from that. I use Hiccup, if I recall correctly. Yeah. There's a reasonable guess on my end that you probably have, even if you don't remember if that's what it was called. It's extremely common. It's a cool compiler for markup, and it works on nested stuff too, and it works on arbitrary key names, right? So actually, I could even, on the example structure that I provided, 0 is not a valid element name. Okay, so it almost works on example, and it won't because 0 is not a valid element name. That makes sense. So actually, So you could also like, well, I don't know. My head's going all over the place. I'm not really getting anywhere with thinking this through. So let me see if so soon I'm gonna just start poking around with this little design thing again, see if I can get a little bit of progress on actually designing this little desk thing and not just messing around with the library I'm trying to build. But before that, I want to get just a note or two in about how I might handle something like putting attributes onto specific sort of things here. And in fact, attributes on specific entities. I could use the idea behind Hiccup, where there is an optional attrs map that you can put immediately after the tag. So if I make an example there, right, it would be def example 3 is going to be a face, and it's going to have, they're all going to have optional, may as well make this the same. Oop. Right, so face could have fill blue, and then this edge could have stroke black, right, and then this one might have nothing, stroke width 2 pixels or something like that, and then this stroke black. And actually this, you can have any number of items here, stroke black as well on this edge, and then this is the data for that edge, and this is the data for that. The only thing I miss out here is if I do need to apply attributes onto this, right? So node, I would want explicitly tagged nodes as well, because that keeps everything consistent as you go through. There's also metadata in Clojure that might be useful in certain cases, but I don't know much about that. Yeah, meta, how does that work again? Meta example, nil. So meta, as far as I know, is like the metadata for anything is stored in a map, and you can programmatically, you can add your own stuff in there, I believe is how that works. What's something that might have actual metadata? I don't know what I'm doing. Clojure.core/string, no. I'll try one. Let me see if I can look at the metadata in one final way. Clojure.repl/source for, what's a cool thing to look at the source for? Multiply. So I think this here, this map, is the metadata for that. Meta, actually, what is clojure.repl/doc of meta? Returns the metadata of an object, returns nil if there is no metadata. So I might just be thinking about, so I'm not actually passing an object, I'm passing the symbol which might not work the way I think it does. So meta of this probably won't work the way I want. Yeah, anyway. I'm pretty sure the meta is this here. Inline arities added. And so macros and as you're building up a function and stuff, you can put stuff into the meta of it. So that's not a bad idea. See if it's wise to use metadata to store adders, other info about objects in the 3D model. Just another design option. Yeah, totally. So I have kind of this running while I have this stream up here. I'm just kind of keeping these little sort of notes things, and I try to go over them later on. So using metadata to store attributes and stuff, popped it in right there. So let me just finish up this little example, and then I'm gonna start editing that design document a little bit just to switch my head around again. Today wasn't the most focused day I've ever had. I don't love that, but sometimes that's the way it goes, so I'll be okay. I think probably in the future what I want to do is have more and more clear, like have a clearer and clearer idea of what I want to accomplish in every single stream, so that I'm not really floundering ever. But probably that comes with practice for streaming as well, right? Like it just kind of takes a bit of time. Okay, so this example, node, right? So here I can optionally put a thing of attributes, a map of attributes right after the tag anywhere in the structure, but I don't have to. I can leave it blank like in the nodes here. So the hiccup render HTML should technically work on this example 3. It should actually make, yeah, it does. So see if I can make that a little more readable. Replace from this string this with whoops, what was it? This with a new line. If I could type properly, then life would be easy, but I can't type properly sometimes. Then print line that. There. Sorry if I had anything to do with that. I mean, with your day not being productive. No, absolutely not. This is totally a me thing. I can, if I start to think really deeply about one thing, you know, there's that part of my brain at the back that wants to just think about something different, because sometimes it's hard to focus. This is absolutely not not anything to do with you, so no worries there. I find over time that, you know, some days, for whatever reason, you know, you wake up, you slept so well, you go on a run and it's great, you're listening to the right music, and you can really go, get a lot of work done, and you make good decisions. Those are great days. And then there are other days where you're distracted, you're making choices, you're trying to do code, and it isn't working the way you thought. And for whatever reason, those days exist too. I find more often than not that it's better for me to kind of just accept that, you know, and work with the state that my brain is in rather than against it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but kind of keeps the pressure off a little bit, while still, you don't stop working, you just let it be okay that your brain is doing this instead of doing that. And you kind of, walk it around where you need to, like a dog who might be a little distracted. I don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, this is an example data structure that kind of makes a bit of sense here. Now, obviously, this doesn't make any sense, right? Because I'm just rendering this as if it's valid HTML, but it isn't. But this idea, I think, has a bit of merit to it. I'll have to see, because it might work the way I want, it might not. Anyway, to just move on beyond that now, what I'm going to do, clear that, close this scratch buffer up here, builder. What I'm going to do is switch over to thinking about a bit of design work for this little standing desk that I want to do. Save that, make sure it's saved. Pardon me. And now I want to see if I can get going on this a little bit. So I've got the document here in its weird state of having some code, and here's a wireframe of an idea that I had, and here's an example of the extrude function that I wrote the other day. I don't need that anymore. I can delete that. So let's go back to this. And we're going to change, for sake of, I think, call it visibility here. Instead of draw faces, I'm just going to draw the edges of it, so I get a wireframe render of it instead. There we go. So we've got a wireframe, and if I zoom in on that, we've got the axes working there, so that's nice. Okay, so if I can pop this back to where I want, first cutout of several for the legs. So a bit of context here just for fun. This library I'm working on, I originally started using it to make quilt patterns. My mom, she designs and makes quilts. Let's see if I have an example. Quilt pattern example. Nope, that's an old example of mine. Is this it? Yeah, so this is just a snippet of one of my mom's designs. She wrote up the document, and on paper she drew the bits and pieces of the diagrams. And so I started writing this library to help me help her make PDFs that she could sell of her patterns. So this is just two-dimensional, obviously, right? It's just SVG, but it's 2D shapes, and I write little bits of code that make these, right? And what I can do is, you can imagine, once you define this piece here, you can define that as a function, right? Or in the case of Hiccup, just as a vector that defines all its data there, and then you can reuse it in future diagrams. So it was actually a really nice way to make these documents for quilt patterns. And then I thought it'd be really cool if I could make some 3D stuff for it and try to use it to share little designs that I make. So that's a little bit of context for where this is coming from. It just seems like a cool way to share, right? So obviously you can imagine this all being done. I'll have built the thing myself, included finished images in this document at the end of it, and then I could post this on a blog or something, and people can take the design and work with it. So that's kind of the idea behind all of this, sort of the motivation. So that's where this is coming from. And I'm doing a little standing desk because I need one. Well, I want one. And using a bit of plywood and a clever design, you can make something pretty cool for relatively cheap with very few materials and tools. So that's the idea. So to finish off a little bit of stuff here, this leg design maybe is confusing. So let me go here. Okay, we've got, so that's the leg sketch. If I define leg dash A, for lack of a better word or name. Naming things is hard, but that's okay. Okay, this leg here, I can actually cut this, right? The extrusion of the sketch. Oops. Oh, great. Press the wrong button. There we go. So, one little flaw with, because I haven't set things up entirely correctly, this is, I'm working in a .md file, right? So I'm using VS Code right now on this here, and the default syntax highlighting, like it's just going to be highlighting the markdown, right? So you see the headings are properly highlighted, but this here is like a thing that my parser does, not any markdown parser. So it doesn't properly highlight these code blocks. So I don't have any syntax highlighting the way you might hope. Right? Even this is just, it just colors a code block differently. So that's a thing that's not perfect about this sort of workflow. But I have ideas for how that can get better in the future. Are you going to wait until you can describe this standing desk design in your format and render it in 3D before building it? In that case, I'm afraid you have to live without a desk for a long time. Yeah, so I think for this first project, basically the functionality as you see it now is close enough to what I need. And by that I mean, I have an example here. If you give me a second, I can figure out the name of the function. Draw. Shoot, what did I call it? Right, it's in the chunk extension, draw edges 2D. So if I go to this part of the code here, if I can get my sanity back here. Right, so leg A is that's that. If I, instead of draw edges here, I draw them in 2D. I also have to move this over. You see that I can make a 2D projection of things, and in the case of a design, this design that I'm doing is intentionally just like cutting plywood and piecing it together almost like a 3D puzzle, right? So all of the design files need to be is flat and maybe one or two isometric views. It's not an overly complicated design for this project. So basically, I have enough of a structure in my code to make the document that I want. And then the next document, I can make it better and make it better and make it better. So I already have a regular desk where I can sit and work at. That's what I'm working at now. So it's not the end of the world either way. But I also don't need to do much more to my library to make the design that I want for this one. I have a huge list in my own files of things I want to design, and they kind of grow in complexity. So the idea is my library can grow in functionality and features and be better designed as I need more advanced functionality out of it. But I figured I'd start here because I can make something that will be useful to me, will be easy for people to replicate if they want to, and doesn't take an insane amount of code to get set up. So it all felt kind of perfect. The cool thing too is, since this is SVG stuff, I'm pretty sure there are like command line utilities to quite easily convert SVG to DXF already. So it's not much of a stretch for me to be able to make a little export utility that can take my document, find all the SVG parts of it, and plunk them out into DXF, which you can then send to a shop if you want them to cut it for you or something like that. Or you can like manipulate it further on your own with whatever program you desire. So that's the idea there. For fun, I'm gonna pop this back to what it was before. I should render okay in a minute. Right, so leg A is this shape here, oriented that way as you see there. Leg B is actually going to be leg A rotated by a certain thing, by a certain set of rotations. And that is this function here. So I'm pretty sure I made this use degrees instead of radians. I feel kind of bad about that, but it also is fine. I also, I was messing around with, I don't know if I'm going to keep this, but like when I was writing this earlier, I was thinking having these dashes at the front or back would be useful as like a convention in the library for showing like this is the function that the user will use. This is a function that is used by that function. But it's kind of silly because like you can use this to define that as well, and I don't know. I need to really refactor stuff once I've got a clearer and clearer idea of what I need. I can make it cleaner and cleaner. So rotate the object S with these rotations. That's the shape of that. So I want to rotate leg A about what axis? I forget. Around X by 90, I think. Let's see. Let's do that. Oh. Of course, I could wait here all day for it to show up as something, but I am not actually drawing it, so not very helpful. Okay, so that was cool. So this is the flaw of wireframe. See, wireframe rendering is really nice because it's actually extremely easy. You don't need to worry about Z order of anything. You don't need to worry about occlusion, right? You just put the edges on the screen, basically. The downside is, in a perfectly isometric view of things that line up, you can get things start to look ambiguous, right? So here, like that, just at a glance, it's confusing to me what this shape might look like. So that is originally why I had draw faces as well, because it adds a bit of clarity. I think we would both benefit from reading a book on Clojure or studying some professional Clojure code. Oh, absolutely. There's always so much room for improvement. And of course, that would be boring to do on stream. So that kind of stuff I have in my schedule to do off stream, of course, because who wants to watch me sit here and read a book? It might not be that fun. But back to this for a moment. So I have this draw faces function, and that already, it's not rendering right because you have, if I inspect this element, the order in which you draw the polygons makes a difference, right? So one thing, you can see how that's changing around there, and all the structures changing up. So like that's confusing as well. So I need a way to properly render faces that properly do occlusion, that do hidden line removal, all of that sort of stuff. And those are all things that can be done, but I need to implement them, and that'll take some time because they're not necessarily the easiest, but that's okay. So if I go back to draw edges, I can use that at least as a starting point for today. That's no problem there. What I want to do is also put leg A there, see if that lines up. If it doesn't line up, I have to move them both by ½ inch because that's where the cutouts are. So, So I have to move leg B in the Y direction by ½ inch so that these will actually nest into each other. Right now they're butted, if that makes sense. They're butted this way. I need them to intersect properly. In my opinion, it's easier to go straight to 3D rendering than to try to remove hidden edges and such. That might be true. In fact, you're probably completely right. Like you mean stuff like using a canvas and the WebGL API, or OpenGL if you don't want to use web technologies. You're almost certainly right. My part of my idea, I'm not necessarily going for what's ultimately easiest. Now, and I might change my mind as things go. Yeah, some GL, it does it all automatically. The one thing that I really do want is the eventual ability to use the code library that I'm writing here to be able to export stuff like step files, so that you could open up the designs in something like SolidWorks or Inventor, which are CAD programs that are used in, they're popular in industries. And I don't know, I guess that's got totally nothing to do with using SVG, so I don't know why I'm even talking about that. You might totally be right. I went for SVG because in the 2D thing, in the 2D diagrams, I just used SVG and it worked perfectly. So this was like the thing that I had at hand already. I'm totally not opposed to using GL, and that's in fact what I intend to do. At some point, I was just thinking maybe it'd be cool to do it all in SVG, even if it's the hard way or like the silly way. You know, sometimes it's fun to just learn things. I don't know. I'll have to see how it goes. But back to the design a little bit here. I also have to move this. Here's another little problem. Since I haven't come up with a proper convention for this yet, you'll notice I have a function move here, mv, and I have another one, mv dash. Really, this is move 2D, and this is move 3D. That's kind of what they mean. I want it to be terse, which is maybe a terrible idea. All that means is this move function is in the context of, on the SVG thing itself, you can move it over. You can move it in X and Y on the SVG level, but move dash, oh, this won't do anything, takes a 3D, so an X, a Y, and a Z. So if I want to move it like that, that should work now, I think. It's possible I've broken something. Whew. There's a load of error. Let's see what I've done. What I'm doing now is running the same file in the REPL so I can just see the error. Modern GL has quite a steep learning curve. I learned the old way of drawing in GL at university, and modern GL from, he was like, what? I kind of think that that seems to be such a common thing, right? You learn this, and if you blink and you wait 2 years, whatever you learned is like almost too old to even know what the new deal is. Now, that's probably not actually true, but it feels true sometimes. I'm totally not opposed to learning GL. It is on the list of things for me to do because I don't want to, like I'm rendering into an HTML document and viewing it in the browser, which is quick and it works totally great, but I don't want my skills to be entirely dependent on a browser, right? I want my programs to be able to display on anyone's computer in whatever kind of context makes sense. So I want to be able to use things that are not web browser tech, and learning GL and other, I think Vulkan is what it is or something like that on Mac. Those things are important to learn, I think, as well. So I'm not opposed to that stuff, not even a little bit. It just is going to take me some time. So what I'm doing right now, I'm just running the same function here in the REPL so that I can see the error. Key must be integer. So I just don't even remember like the argument signature of my functions. That's part of my problem. S delta. Consistency with Vulkan's much harder yet. Oh, fantastic. Oh man. So you said you learned GL at university. Were you in a computer science course or something more specific? Like some kind of graphics specific university course? I don't know. That sounds interesting. Yeah, computer science. Nice. There are days where I wish I did mechanical engineering, which I loved. I think it was really cool. But there are days where I wish I also did instead computer science, because sometimes things just zip right over my head that I really think I have the capability of understanding, but just don't yet have the background. So, those things do come. It just, man, I wish sometimes that I learned stuff earlier. Oh well. check consistency with args order. Example, move should have object first or after deltas. I don't know, I need to write some documentation for that. So, according to that, I have to do this like this instead, which confused me. Although it does, that is consistent with how I did the rotate. Is it the right thing to do? I don't know. It's hard to know sometimes. 0.50. See if that works. Superficial course in OpenGL. Huh. I remember, oh man, it's still broken. I'm still doing something wrong. Wow, that's never happened before. Wrong number of arguments. So this is exposing another big weakness with my current workflow here. If I make errors in the document, I don't see them until I switch over to the REPL. But if I put the document in my Emacs here and then also shove my Firefox into the same window, I kind of run out of screen real estate, which isn't perfect either. So got work to do. A superficial course is what you had? Huh. Yeah, sorry, I was saying, I kind of experienced a similar thing with SolidWorks for mechanical engineering. Now, I was able to learn the program on my own at the end of the day. It was totally fine. But because it's used in industry, it's kind of nice to have classes on it in school, but the universities clearly don't care to teach it that much. It just kind of was in this sort of middle ground of, we're going to teach you, but really you're going to have to teach yourself. I feel like that's maybe similar. Mechanical engineering has real math, so it's superior to CS. I don't know. It does have real math. I won't deny that. Superiority, though, that's a contest I don't want to be a part of. You know, at the end of the day, a lot of the engineering calculations that we need to do, you just do like Newton-Raphson method, and you can use a computer for that. So, I kind of think it's a wash. It is true though that you need to know before you just make the computer do it. You kind of need to know what you're trying to accomplish. So, I'm thoroughly impressed with a lot of the stuff that comes out of the computer science areas though. So, no need for me to make it a contest, in my opinion. Okay, let's fix this error that I had here. Of course, I gotta close that off. So then I'm moving the rotated leg by this amount here, right? And then that's what leg B should look like. So if that's working, that should shift this way. And it does. Now, there's one other error I have. I actually need to entirely flip it 180 as well. So what I need to do is, I don't think this is going to work because of how rotation works. I want to do 180 around Z, and this is almost certainly not going to work. Yeah. So I also want to move it so this, okay, I'm going to move it into position for a moment. First of all, this I actually have a global variable for, or not really a variable, right here, G thickness, def G thickness, GT. So I can leave that there. So I'm going to move this along the x-axis by the leg length, which I defined in a let binding here. So I can't actually use leg L because it doesn't exist in this context here. So I have to hard code it, which I'm going to do right now for laziness. But this is something I really have to think about, how to capture variables appropriately in 3D modeling so that I'm not repeating things and hard coding values everywhere, right? Because I want to be able to define things once. So that's going to be quite hard. So let me put a note here. Wrong spot. Global variables, constraints, equations that use other dims, etc. Equivalently, it's like there's a name for that in SolidWorks that I'm trying to think of. Whatever. I don't want to hard code values all throughout the 3D model. So I kind of wonder if I should like put maybe store global variables slash equations slash functions in a state map of some kind, and then just have a sort of maybe have a macro run over everything that detects when you're calling those, or like you could riddle keywords into things, and then the macro detects the keywords and plunks in the appropriate value into the whole code structure as it goes. Value or S expression. That might be cool, but that might be really messy. Find out another day. Right, so that's a long little tangent there. Leg width, is 3, so I'm just going to do that. Am I even moving things the right way? I'll find out in a moment. Yeah, so I'm in the right spot, but I just noticed that it's also not flipped the right way, this way. So here we get into really confusing things. I'm nesting another rotate in there. Do I want to do it that way? No, I want to do it this way. Right? Rotate this whole mess, this whole thing, along or around x-axis 180. Let me also make a note here. Make rote implementation cleaner. Look into using quaternions or being more explicit with Euler angles, etc. Or at least compare my semantics with the semantics that OpenSCAD uses. We'll see. Got a lot of notes for myself today. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. See, I'm in the right spot, but I actually no longer need to move by the global thickness here either. Man, I can't wait till I figure out, there we go. See, now that is exactly the right shape of these things. They're nested into each other perfectly there. And it is confusing to see, or it's hard to tell, but they're lined up with each other. So that is kind of cool, right? Because they're actually the same piece, they're just oriented differently and nested into each other, which is really nice. So now I can actually go define a leg as just leg, the union, and union doesn't, I haven't coded union, but I can define leg just as leg A and leg B, like that. Actually, I wonder what would happen if I merge these. No, that would break. Actually, I actually need to write functions that handle groups or assemblies or something like that. Right? So what I'm trying to do here is wrap this shape here is leg A and leg B, but I want to define those two things as one thing, leg. Now I can put them in a vector, and that's what leg is, but then I can't do this. I have to do the concatenation of axes with legs. I think. Oof, something goofed. Unmatched delimiter. Yeah, this workflow needs serious improvements. Still broken because why? Symbol legs doesn't exist. Oh, leg. There we go. Now it built. Right, so so I could write a like a merge, a union kind of thing. Hmm. Or assemble group shapes, group object. Yeah, objects together as assemblies. Very descriptive. Okay. Clojure. I can't work for too much longer. I do have to get going, have some food and stuff like that. So I won't get this part done, assemblies, but it's an important thing to add, right? Because what I have right now is two different situations, right? So mapping draw edges onto a list is totally fine, but I can't really, unless I fix draw edges to automatically work through a nested structure, which is possible, maybe. I am using a list, a vector, to represent a collection of objects, like an assembly of objects. Now, I don't know if that's the right approach. The other thought that goes through my mind is to merge the two maps that make up each thing, right? So if I'm back here and I do extruded try, right? I can merge stuff onto that map, extruded try, and I can merge this map stuff to give it extra keys, but I could also merge or update with whatever, and I could append all of these things to the list so that it would become a single object with all of the faces and all of the edges and stuff. Now the problem with that is I would have to update one of the objects by incrementing all of the indices of all of these things by the number of edges in the other one and edges in the face. So merging them that way is confusing, and then unmerging them again is also confusing. So what I want to do instead is, I don't know. Def example group is going to be what? A map of solids. It's just a map of things, which is just a list of things. Like that, right? I'm not sure. I am going to refill my water for a minute. I will be right back again. Hey, and Permyakov, have a good one, eh? Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for chatting. I really appreciate that. Keep up the good work. I'll do my best. Hey, if there's anyone else out there wanting to engage in chat, you go right ahead, eh? I'd love that. If you're there just watching, totally cool too. I really appreciate that. And Permyakov, thanks for a follow too. I just saw that now as well. Really appreciate that. Yeah, anyone out there watching this now or later, I really appreciate that. Honestly, I do. I am having a great time doing this. I want to keep it going. So if there's stuff that can make things better that you see, just let me know. You know, I love to make this better. Okay, enough chit chat about that. I am thinking I lied, I'm not thinking. I just let my mind for a moment. You know how that is. I think you know how that is. Hopefully other people know how that is. Right, so the idea of a group is different. The idea of a group is different than something like a merge or like a union of 3D model parts, right? Like a union turns two pieces into a single solid piece, but a group just says these things are together. So it's like welding two pieces of steel together versus holding two pieces of steel together and saying that these two wrapping them in a bundle or something, right? Like they, in both cases, two pieces go together, but in one case they become a new thing entirely, right? In a union sort of situation. Excuse me. The simplest thing that comes to mind is this, actually. I could just redefine all right, so a drawing, right, example triangle has nodes, edges, and faces. I could actually redefine the base shape of this thing to be something that looks like this. I could do def ASDF, for lack of a name, objects, right? And then what goes into that is, in fact, a list of objects. So ASDF is practically the same as it was before. The only difference is it's nested one level deep here in an objects tag there, and so then what I can do, right? Like by default, there's just the single object, but you can update this map ASDF within the key objects. And the function is conj, right? And I can conj into the list that's there another xtry if I want to. Hey, what? Do I know what I'm doing? Not totally. There we go. Okay. So let me see if that's what I want it to be. Right. So now if out of that, I take objects out of that thing that I just made. Hey. Have I confused myself a little bit? Something's going a little wrong here for a minute. Sometimes the REPL is great, and sometimes it just misbehaves a little bit. There. Okay. Right, so what I just did there was this example object, I conged another triangle into it, so now the thing is now a group of two extruded triangles. So I was just checking that the list of objects now has a count of 2, which it does. So if I just do the same on just ASDF, it should say 1, a count of 1. Yes, it does. Okay, so that is probably what I'll do for this version of things. So to group objects together, let's define Is join already join's not the right word. Group is probably already a thing, right? Group by. Let's group objects. We'll do that, right? We'll do object A and object B. So group will work this way. You assume object A is like the thing, and you're gonna smush B into A, right? So that is going to run by doing this update magic here. That's not magic. Update A. The key objects with the lambda function conj B into that. Let me see that the order of that is correct. Because I always mix it up. If I conj, right? So if I have a list that's just containing A, and I want to conj onto that list B, it pops B in front. So I actually want to do this. I want to update doesn't matter. Maybe the order doesn't matter. That is true, or it can be true. Because I could reverse this, but if it's a lazy secret, reverse. I'll just leave it. Assume order doesn't matter. We'll go with that for now. For the time being, that's fine. Right, so right here we have a thing that's group 2 objects, and then I want to be able to group objects, right, which will be does this work? If I so ASDF I defined as an example object, I think, yeah? Yes, I did. If I make a list of ASDFs, just to test this out. Oh, did I don't need that, that's fine. Oop. Oh boy, goofing around, always goofing. There we go. Group 2 objects. Okay, so I want to see if I can do reduce with group 2 objects, right? But I want to reduce over this list of ASDF, 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 ASDF. Oh, it did work. Sweet. Count objects of that thing I just did. Gotta type it right. Story of my life. Yeah, that makes sense. So if I do just 3, sweet. Awesome. Okay, so define group objects is gonna be and objects, right? And objects. And it's just gonna be reduce group 2 objects over the list of objects. So let's see if that's going to work. Group objects, and I want to group ASDF, ASDF, and ASDF, right? And just to make sure, I'm going to count that. Count the objects from this thing. Objects. Three. 4. And 5. Sweet. That's looking okay. So all I need to do is here def and draw edges to test, right? This is gonna be let's assume it's a rendered object, and it's gonna be 4 object, where that's gonna be objects of this object, this rendered thing, right? For each of those, you're actually just going to draw edges. Draw edges of that object, and then go ahead and do things normally. So let's see. Let me see if that will work. Prior to that, I have to do let's do that. This is getting too messy. Gotta clean this up. Right, so into object, all that's gonna do is create a map that is objects list item, like that. Forces it into the shape I want. So let me see if I can make it work a little bit here. So if I define leg to be the group objects of group objects there of leg A, leg B, but leg A and leg B I have to wrap in the conversion thing here because they're not built properly yet. Right, group those objects, that's the leg definition, and now this won't work. This has to also be converted. Draw edges test. Is that going to work? My guess is it's not going to work because I might have forgotten something important. So we'll see if errors spew out. Ooh, it built, but it did not render. And that would be because I don't, let's see here. Draw edges test does exist. And you want to map that onto, for object in objects of row, draw edges. Well, okay, let's try with some example data here. Right, so we have an object that's not been, if I do this, into object, x try, does that work? It creates an objects thing where that's in a list. Okay, so does draw faces test work on that? Let's see. Nope. Oh, of course it's draw edges test, not faces. Draw edges. It appears to work. So Y Why do I get no render? Let's inspect. This SVG contains nothing. Nope, it does contain stuff, but only, oop, my bad. Oop. Let's simplify a little bit here. So it does render the axes, right? But it does not render leg. Group objects should work. Let me instead of this, let me just draw edges test leg. Save that. See if we get an error. It builds. Okay, and it does just render one of these. So we've got a faulty thing of logic in my brain that didn't okay, so it's not mapping over all the objects, which is fine. I just have to fix that. Right? So for objects of row, draw edges of that object. Well, why isn't that working the way I think it should work? Let me see something here. It does, so it's clearly going through both, right? Like it's just not displaying for A of a list 1, 2, 3, do A 1, 2, 3. That's not right. Flattens everything all the way down. Not what I need. Okay, this is a problem for me to do tomorrow because I need to eat some food and I'm very hungry. Those are two different ways of ultimately saying the same thing. I need to go because I need to get some food and I have some other things I got to get done today. I really appreciate the interaction today. I really do want to keep this up, and I really love that. If you're watching now, just chilling, that's totally cool too. I appreciate I even appreciate just the views, just having it on in the background, that kind of thing. So I'm going to go today, but I'll absolutely be back again tomorrow, 12:30, for at least 2 hours is usually how long I target for, and I've been consistently going a little longer than that. So if you liked it, swing by again tomorrow and join me again. I'd really appreciate that. I hope everyone's having a good time. I'm going to get going. Bye.